Our bass player, Simon, was absent for the first time in the Cure's existence. For us, that was the most crucial factor. In the past 15 years, we have only performed 3 times. In the history of rock music, Robert Smith is a singular figure. He stands out with his dark eyes, tangled hair, and voice that sounds like it was a bad dream. Robert is more than just the Cure's lead singer. He embodies the spirit of an entire era that has lost its direction. Songs like Boys Don't Cry Love Song and Disintegration are listened to by those who have never felt like they belong in this noisy society. Over 30 million copies of The Cure's albums have been sold worldwide. In 2018, 65,000 spectators were moved to tears by the stage lights during their 40th anniversary performance in Hyde Park. Even though he is widely regarded as the goth king and the father of post-punk and alternative rock, Robert Smith prefers to lead a tranquil life devoid of drama, children, and noise. He acts as though he never wanted to be famous. One musician got into altercations behind the scenes on a European tour, was expelled from high school for having too much influence, and was once accused of racism due to the name of a song. In addition, he has been with his first love for over 50 years, has never left The Cure, and continues to perform on stage while approaching 70. Like a melancholy song, Robert Smith's life is quiet, dark, and lovely in a way that a spotlight cannot capture. What made a child who experienced bullying because of their differences a global cultural icon? Behind that wild hair, dreamy eyes, and smudged lipstick, what's really going on? Check it out by watching this video. Early life. Although Robert Smith was born in 1959 in Blackpool, he never truly settled down as a child. His family relocated frequently, first to Huddersfield, and then to Blackpool before settling in Crawley, West Sussex. This is the location where The Cure began. Robert was raised in a modest southern England family home with lengthy corridors and wet evenings. To drown out the sounds of the outside world, he enjoyed hiding in his room and spinning vinyl records. In his family, there was no such thing as poverty. His father, Alex Smith, had served in the Navy and had a warm, powerful voice. He frequently sang to his children at night, and the first songs he taught Robert were always well known. His mother, Rita, was a pianist who believed that music was the only thing that could help her children navigate a less engaging world. Neither parent forced their children to do anything unless it made them happy. Rather, they always instructed kids to sing and play. Out of 4 children, Robert was the third. The family's star was his sister Janet, who was dubbed the piano prodigy, due to the fact that she studied music with their mother from an early age. Actually, Janet accidentally pushed Robert in a different direction. In order to have his own voice and avoid being overheard, he learned to play the guitar. It screams without saying anything. My sister was too good, so I had to find another way. I chose the guitar, it says. In school, Robert frequently rebelled against the rules. He was attacked after class because it was considered bad behavior to wear a black silk skirt to school in the 1970s. His companions ridiculed him and believed he should be disciplined, while his teachers claimed he was simply being disobedient. Those incidents didn't transform Robert. Instead, they made him more reticent, cautious, and committed to music as his only refuge. When Robert was a student at St. Wilfrid's Comprehensive in 1976, he performed at the school's Christmas event with his band Malice, which was the precursor to The Cure. He was suspended because the administration said he was a negative influence on other children, despite the fact that the concert performed better than anyone had anticipated. He was expelled from the location where he was supposed to learn how to be authentic. But Robert persisted. His earliest tracks were written by him. His words, "I play by ear, not by sight." Although he didn't have a terrible upbringing in the traditional sense, He was the ideal outsider because of how people perceived him as a strange youngster and how his family silently supported him. He had the strength to transform his darkness into music that resonated with listeners worldwide. Early years. Following his 1976 suspension for playing with the band Malice, Robert Smith never returned to school. Music was the only open road, therefore he chose it. Along with his boyhood pals Pearl Thompson, Michael Dempsey, and Elle Tolhurst, Robert founded Easy Cure. They are a rock group that combines post-punk and French philosophical themes with experimental textures and frigid tones. It's a straightforward name with a lot of meaning. Music may help those who are feeling lost, lonely, or hurt. Later, the name was abbreviated to The Cure. Robert, when just 19 years old, was already the band's lead singer, creative director, and stylist when The Cure signed with Fiction Records in 1978. The Cure created a stir as soon as their debut single, Killing an Arab, was released. Based on Albert Camus' The Stranger, the song served as an intellectual allegory for the absurdity and futility of violence. However, it was simple to misunderstand the title, and Robert Smith had to reiterate that the song was never intended to be racist. "If I had known it would be misinterpreted like that, I'd have named it differently," he said. "But sometimes the most honest things are the ones that are most distorted." Robert's ethereal voice and distinctively chilly guitar playing conveyed a range of emotions in their debut album, Three Imaginary Boys, 1979, including sarcasm, ennui, and emptiness. However, that was only the beginning. Robert's film 17 Seconds, 1980, Faith, 1981, and Pornography, 1982, delved farther into the depths of the human mind. Death and meaninglessness appeared to be inevitable aspects of life there, and melancholy didn't require an explanation. Porn was more than simply an album. It was a film nightmare. Robert thought he was going to lose everything throughout the meetings. He subsequently stated, "I wrote Pornography because I wasn't sure I'd still be alive after it." The band was on the brink of fame and ruin, with its members doing drugs, drinking alcohol, and becoming increasingly irate. The band momentarily broke up after a backstage altercation between Simon Gallup and Robert Smith in Strasbourg at the conclusion of the 1982 tour. Stress, arguments, and restless nights had caused their relationship to end. The Cure appeared to be finished after just 3 records. Despite his life being in ruins, Robert continued to sing. After playing guitar for Susie and the Banshees, he formed the side band The Glove with Steven Severin. In addition to helping him regain his focus, these digressions enhanced his creativity, which would eventually enable The Cure to emerge from their shadow. And Robert was more than just a tired, lonely, but sane musician by the time he rejoined The Cure in 1983. He was a musician who had experienced the songs he composed firsthand. From that debris, he was going to compose the best sections of his career. Career breakthrough. The band was still in ruins from earlier altercations when Robert Smith rejoined The Cure in 1984. The group's reputation was damaged, and friends and colleagues had left. But instead of turning around, he continued on, piecing together each fragment to create a new, bolder, more emotionally nuanced, and larger version of The Cure that could contain all the suffering he had never publicly expressed. When The Head on the Door was released in 1985, this was altered. For the first time, despite the darkness, Robert's music sounded lovely. The song, In Between Days, with its upbeat melody and melancholic lyrics, could transform pain into a danceable musical accompaniment. As the band gained popularity in the U.S., they traveled the world and rose above the gothic underground scene in the charts. Their true masterpiece was Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, 1987. A daring, expansive double album that featured a variety of styles, from ballad to funk, from yelling guitars to whispery vocals. Just as insane as he was feeling, Robert prepared a musical feast. Due to the record's enormous success, The Cure gained international recognition. The song, "Just Like Heaven," was very popular. It was a wonderful song about love and sorrow that gave you the impression that you were both flying and falling apart. And a beauty was just getting started. In 1989, Robert's album Disintegration was released. He felt as though time was pushing him over the brink when he penned it, at the age of 29. "I thought I'd die at 30, so I wrote this album as a farewell," he said, and it was accurate. Disintegration was a journey of songs, from the lonesome "Pictures of You" to the depressing, plain song to the affectionate love song. The album sold over 3 million copies, performed well on the Billboard charts, and remains one of the most comprehensive statements about love, death, and losing oneself in popular music. From 1989 until 1992, Robert Smith and The Cure were at the height of their popularity. Robert's photo became a pop culture classic, and the Prayer Tour was a global hit. People of all ages recognized him as the face of gothic rock after seeing it on MTV and Rolling Stone. Oddly enough, however, Robert distanced himself further as his fame grew. He didn't try to become famous, acquire expensive mansions, or turn The Cure into a marketable brand. Rock music was increasingly being marketed in the early 1990s. However, Robert Smith only composed music when he had a significant message to convey. He consistently penned works that resonated deeply with his audience. In a world of rock rife with mayhem, flimsy romances, scandals, and never-ending parties, Robert Smith has always stood out. There was only one woman he liked, and he never tried to disguise it. When Robert was just 13 years old, he met Mary Poole at Crawley's St. Wilfrid's School, and the two have been together ever since. They were friends first and discovered one another as they matured through various phases of life before falling in love. Robert was attacked for wearing a velvet skirt, expelled from school, and his band's makeup changed frequently. Mary said nothing, remained silent, and did not go. They started dating in 1976, the year The Cure was founded. Before getting married in 1988, they had been dating for over a decade. They chose not to have children because they didn't want to, not because they couldn't. "I can't imagine bringing a child into this world when I'm still figuring out how to survive in it myself," Robert once stated. Instead, he chose to love Mary with all of his writing. Love Song, The Cure's most exquisite love ballad, was written just for her. They kept their word during the many years they spent on tour. There were no scandals involving infidelity, broken marriages brought on by celebrity, or poor choices made after excessive drinking. When he was 15, he was just a man who always returned home to the girl who sat and watched him play guitar. Nevertheless, love did not improve Robert Smith's situation. He has struggled with nameless despair, anxiety, sleeplessness, and the sense of alienation among strangers. At times, the public hardly ever saw him. He only appeared on stage or in studios, where he could yell without anybody questioning why. Being discussed bothered Robert. Only because of the music did he stand there. Behind the scenes, he enjoyed a cup of tea late at night, a quiet chamber, half-finished writings, and Mary. The only individual who stayed on course during The Cure's voyage was Mary. Despite having his share of bad moods, Robert Smith was never overcome by them, since he always had someone or somewhere to turn to. Legacy and influence. One of the few bands to remain active for nearly 50 years without experiencing any sex, drug, or arrest issues is The Cure. However, that does not imply that Robert Smith's journey was simple. Because he remained silent and refused to give an explanation in public, some people misinterpreted him and occasionally passed judgment on him. The first altercation originated in the nearest area of the band. Robert Smith and bassist Simon Gallup became so enraged with one another during the Pornography tour in 1982 that they began fighting backstage in Strasbourg. The argument was caused by months of mental strain, strict schedules, and the conflict of two powerful creative egos in addition to their disagreements over the set list and sound levels. The Cure nearly disbanded. The band didn't perform for a year after Robert briefly quit. Lel Tolhurst, an old acquaintance, who was Robert's school buddy and helped form the band, was the reason for the second split. Robert had to make the difficult decision to fire Tolhurst after disintegration, since his drunkenness was becoming worse and impacting their work atmosphere and performance. Prior to becoming a drummer, Tolhurst was a keyboardist. It was an extremely painful decision. Robert had to choose between keeping the band together or being loyal to the past, despite the fact that he was aware of how devastating it was to lose someone who had been with him since he was a young boy. Some mishaps were caused by media attention and misunderstandings rather than internal factors. Killing an Arab, 1978, their debut single, gave Robert Smith a moniker he didn't want. The title was immediately interpreted as racist in today's highly charged environment, despite the fact that the song, which was based on Albert Camus' The Stranger, was a philosophical metaphor about how absurd life is. To make matters worse, radical organizations misquoted it. Robert had to issue formal statements rejecting any affiliation with hate groups after receiving a great deal of negative criticism. Subsequent releases contained disclaimers that described the literary sources of the song's inspiration. He apologized for something he didn't mean and stated, "If I knew, I would have changed the title, but I never wrote music to hurt anyone." Robert remains controversial with certain reviews even after all these years. Some claim that he is strange to attract attention, claiming that his wild hair, smudged eyeliner, and dark clothing were all merely marketing gimmicks. However, they overlooked the fact that Robert Smith had that appearance at the age of 16, prior to any contracts, appearances, or notoriety. No plan was in place. He did it. Mark Hoppus ridiculed Robert Smith's attempt to kiss him at an after-party following their 2004 Wembley performance in his book Blink-182. One of the most recent misunderstandings resulted from this. The article created a stir in the news despite being presented in a nice manner. Robert remained silent. Perhaps he is too accustomed to hearing about him from people he doesn't actually know. For almost 40 years, Robert Smith has been involved in conflicts. He is an artist who refuses to compromise in order to appease the masses, not because he wishes to be. Instead of changing who he is, he would rather argue with his best friend, lose a record deal, or be missed. Because he is so tenacious, he may still be here, playing his guitar and melodies that keep people up at night beneath the stage lights. Legacy and influence. Despite not having invented Gothic rock, Robert Smith prevented it from being forgotten. Robert's use of smudged lipstick, a faraway look, and melancholy tunes altered the tone of music. It wasn't necessary for the music to be loud or ominous to be icy. Teens saw The Cure as the only friend who truly understood them, scrawled the words to Disintegration in their notebooks, and wore black. He never claimed to be a member of any movement. The influence of Robert Smith extends far beyond Gothic rock. He served as a role model for artists who didn't strive to appear cool by causing trouble or being rebellious, and who weren't scared to be open about their emotions. Placebo, Interpol, Trent Reznor, 9 Inch Nails, William Corgan, Smashing Pumpkins, and even Billie Eilish have all expressed how much their music and energy have impacted them. Robert also altered the way musicians write songs by considering them as a means of self-healing rather than as a food item. He utilized the phrase, "Music isn't something to sell. Music is what keeps me from disappearing." Robert remains controversial with certain reviews even after all these years. Some claim that he is strange to attract attention, claiming that his wild hair, smudged eyeliner, and dark clothing were all merely marketing gimmicks. However, they overlook the fact that Robert Smith had that appearance at the age of 16, prior to any contracts, appearances, or notoriety. No plan was in place. He did it. Mark Hoppus ridiculed Robert Smith's attempt to kiss him at an after-party following their 2004 Wembley performance in his book Blink-182. One of the most recent misunderstandings resulted from this. The article created a stir in the news despite being presented in a nice manner. Robert remained silent. Perhaps he is too accustomed to hearing about him from people he doesn't actually know. For almost 40 years, Robert Smith has been involved in conflicts. He is an artist who refuses to compromise in order to appease the masses, not because he wishes to be. Instead of changing who he is, he would rather argue with his best friend, lose a record deal, or be missed. Because he is so tenacious, he may still be here, playing his guitar and melodies that keep people up at night beneath the stage lights. Legacy and influence. Despite not having invented Gothic rock, Robert Smith prevented it from being forgotten. Robert's use of smudged lipstick, a faraway look, and melancholy tunes altered the tone of music. It wasn't necessary for the music to be loud or ominous to be icy. Teens saw The Cure as the only friend who truly understood them, scrawled the words to Disintegration in their notebooks, and wore black. He never claimed to be a member of any movement. The influence of Robert Smith extends far beyond Gothic rock. He served as a role model for artists who didn't strive to appear cool by causing trouble or being rebellious, and who weren't scared to be open about their emotions. Placebo, Interpol, Trent Reznor, 9 Inch Nails, William Corgan, Smashing Pumpkins, and even Billie Eilish have all expressed how much their music and energy have impacted them. Robert also altered the way musicians write songs by considering them as a means of self-healing rather than as a food item. He utilized the phrase, "Music isn't something to sell. Music is what keeps me from disappearing." There was no noteworthy news release or grand farewell tour. As the lights go out, it might just be a little stage with some vintage music playing in the background. Outside of music, he is essentially unknown. There are no TV series, podcasts, or social media accounts dedicated to him. He and his wife, Mary, who is the only person he has ever publicly loved, reside in an old mansion in Sussex. They have cats and maintain their yard. Robert continues to write occasionally, but not to escape but rather to preserve the aspects of himself that he has never let go of. For many people, Robert Smith is a hero. It's possible that he made no effort to be anything to himself. He's just a man, quiet, loyal, honest, and lonely, who decided to express his grief via music rather than words. That saved him a great deal of money. Not all musicians create music that endures. Robert Smith achieved this by being truthful rather than by planning. When someone plays Love Song, Disintegration, or A Forest, Robert remains present, in the noises, in the shadows, in the individuals who once felt as though they had no place. In a world that never ceased shouting, Robert Smith remained loyal to himself for almost half a century. Even if his songs created history, he will always be regarded as a legend. A man of depth, tenderness, courage, and stillness who made solitude an art form and provided a safe haven for millions of lost souls. He was excellent without creating much noise. In addition to his musical legacy, Robert Smith leaves behind kindness, devotion, and evidence that you can be who you are and still be loved.